Hello. What are we going to do to take action now with respect to climate action? Over the last 6 weeks, we've been focusing on people talking about climate change and the fact that we're on this clock, which it ends up being about a 10-year clock, as the crow flies. And we've been covering the work of Terry Patton in his book. We've been covering Jeremy Rifkin in his book and the work of Naomi Klein. These are not only authors, but they're activists and they're speakers, and they have subgroups of people that are coming. And they're all different, but we see an opportunity of what can we do to help bring these groups together and get us all talking together in a timely way. So let's talk about that. Sondra, I'm Art Johnson, and this is Sondra Earley. Go ahead, Sondra. Tell me about what are some of your thoughts right at this moment?
I'm feeling, hi Art, hi everybody. I'm feeling pretty exercised about getting on the clock and making sure that we can start taking some action. The other thing is I'm interested in reaching as many people out there as possible so that we can do the education and awareness and get them up to speed so they can be actual participants. That's not just you and I, but it's all folks.
Well, I'm an entrepreneur, and where some people see challenge, I see opportunity.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that just happened is last Sunday, the UN COP25 is, this organization of nation state partners met and had a very, very dismal outcome. Brazil blocked changes, Australia, which even is on fire, blocked some changes. So no one really even recommended actions were not approved. And a lot of that came from the Trump administration and not cooperating initially in the climate and the Paris talks. And then, so this kind of like fell apart. But what happened to me was I said, okay, let's why the big shining point in that whole conference was young Greta again. So I just want to play what she says, and I'm kind of listening to her in terms of the action that we need. Her leadership is absolutely fantastic. So I'm going to go ahead and play that, if you don't.
Because even at 1 degree, people are dying from the climate crisis. Because that is what the United Science calls for, to avoid destabilizing the climate so that we have the best possible chance to avoid setting off irreversible chain reactions such as melting glaciers, polar ice, and thawing Arctic permafrost. Every fraction of a degree matters. So there it is again. This is my message. This is what I want you to focus on. So please tell me, how do you react to these numbers without feeling at least some level of panic? How do you respond to the fact that basically nothing is being done about this without feeling the slightest bit of anger? And how do you communicate this without sounding alarmist? I would really like to know. Since the Paris Agreement, global banks have invested $1.9 trillion in fossil fuels. 100 companies are responsible for 71% of global emissions. The G20 countries account for almost 80% of total emissions. The richest 10% of the world's population produce half of our CO2 emissions, while the poorest 50% account for just 1/10. We indeed have some work to do, but some more than others. Recently, a handful of rich countries pledged to reduce their emissions of greenhouse gases by so and so many % by this or that date, or to become climate neutral or net zero in so and so many years. This may sound impressive at first glance, but even though the intentions may be good, this is not leadership. This is not leading, this is misleading. Because most of these pledges do not include aviation, shipping, and imported and exported goods in consumption. They do, however, include the possibility of countries to offset their emissions elsewhere. These pledges don't include the immediate yearly reduction rates needed for wealthy countries, which is necessary to stay within the remaining tiny budget. Zero in 2050 means nothing if high emission continues even for a few years, then the remaining budget will be gone. Without seeing the full picture, we will not solve this crisis. Finding holistic solutions is what the COP should be all about. But instead, it seems to have turned into some kind of opportunity for countries to negotiate loopholes and to avoid raising their ambition. Countries are finding clever ways around having to take real action, like double counting emissions reductions and moving their emissions overseas, and walking back on their promises to increase ambition, or refusing to pay for solutions or loss and damage. This has to stop. What we need is real drastic emission cuts at the source. But of course, just reducing emissions is not enough. Our greenhouse gas emissions has to stop. To stay below 1.5 degrees, we need to keep the carbon in the ground. Only setting up distant dates and saying things which give the impression of that action is underway will most likely do more harm than good, because the changes required are still nowhere in sight. The politics needed does not exist today, despite what you might hear from world leaders. And I still believe that the biggest danger is not inaction. The real danger is when politicians and CEOs are making it look like real action is happening when, in fact, almost nothing is being done apart from clever accounting and creative PR. I have been fortunate enough to be able to travel around the world. And my experience is that the lack of awareness is the same everywhere, not the least amongst those elected to lead us. There is no sense of urgency whatsoever. Our leaders are not behaving as if we were in an emergency. In an emergency, you change your behavior. If there's a child standing in the middle of the road and cars are coming at full speed, you don't look away because it's too uncomfortable. You immediately run out and rescue that child. And without that sense of urgency, how can we, the people, understand that we are facing a real crisis? And if the people are not fully aware of what is going on, then they will not put pressure on the people in power to act. And without pressure from the people, our leaders can get away with basically not doing anything, which is where we are now. And around it goes. In just 3 weeks, we will enter a new decade. A decade that will define our future. Right now, we are desperate for any sign of hope. Well, I'm telling you, there is hope. I have seen it. But it does not come from the governments or corporations, it comes from the people. The people who have been unaware but are now starting to wake up. And once we become aware, we change. People can change. People are ready for change. And that is the hope, because we have democracy. And democracy is happening all the time, not just on election day, but every second and every hour. It is public opinion that runs the free world. In fact, every great change throughout history has come from the people. We do not have to wait. We can start the change right now. We, the people. Thank you.
Art, we have been taking a look and getting thoroughly immersed in the crisis of this century, the crisis of this decade. Climate control. Greta talks a lot about the impact of the climate across the universe, across all of the countries. Here, it's about we. We can't wait for them. We can't wait for they. We can't wait for anybody but ourselves, we the people, which is an interesting place to be, in the fact that we, the people, have so much power. So there's a new crisis every day in our universe. But let's make a pledge here to gain more awareness, more education for ourselves, our communities, our families, moving on up the chain. Don't be afraid to speak out. You must speak out at this point so that we can, in the next 8 years, make sure that we do have a clean environment and that we understand what we can do to get to that point. We need to take action. It's about us at this point, taking action to impart our wisdom and our success and our knowledge onto them. Nowhere in the past history have we had all candidates, new presidential candidates, just in the United States alone, talking about climate change. But it's our turn to understand what we can do individually and collectively to bring about that change. Art, I'm back to you.
Well, thank you so much. I think that's very insightful, Sondra, and I totally agree with you. And I think she raised a really good point that a lot of people don't act like they're in an emergency, because it's this wicked predicament is such that unless your house is burning down, unless you're being flooded out, unless your crops are gone, okay, unless your house is sinking in the middle of methane and you're actually seeing methane on fire coming out of the ice, right?
Right.
You're not as aware. But the fact is that the climate, the climate is a teacher, okay? When I think that, we're entering into a thing where we're entering not an age of progress, but an age of resilience, where the planet is doing some wilding based on what we did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we're going to have, it's not a cakewalk in any way. It is a crisis. But sometimes people only come to the occasion until they see the crisis. And you can count on more and more crises happening that are going to educate more and more people to say there's more to this than just the change of the weather. There's a causal relationship between how we are, what our consciousness is, and what we do. I think it was really, really good that she raised the whole idea with all those figures being thrown out. They're not even talking about aviation and how much pollution every time a jet takes off, how much pollution that thing puts out, okay? But I'm really, I am so enthusiastic because we are actually working with new technology. We're meeting face to face with people across the planet now. And I think that what we need to do is just discover and continue to learn what other front runners are already doing and how we can be of service to humanity in terms of promoting, bringing them on our show, figuring out where we're still missing, and fill in the gaps in terms of what is needed to raise consciousness. Okay, it's not just another issue. And I think that's the difference between just another storyline and making this a really powerful narrative, that we are making history through the process of that narrative. I am so excited. I'm so excited by you coming with me on this and expanding this in such a way that people will get it, and that we can include so many people that normally are overlooked. One of the things that's in this Jeremy Lust book is he talks about the importance of peer assemblies. If we look at currents, there's some groups of people that are rapidly moving really fast, making plans, planning their strategy. I mean, Jeremy Rifkin is working with top level government people and with investors and the financial community that already see the handwriting on the wall. But there's a role that we have to reach out across communities, diverse communities, across ages and generations, to build these peer assemblies, because without them, they're going to feel passed up. They'll miss the jobs. Jobs will come and jobs will go, and more people will be put out of work, because this is talking about this is an end of a second industrial revolution and the beginning of a third industrial revolution. Right. And you can't just jump into that without some training and some skills, okay? And a heartfelt understanding for where people are, and empower them to even be trainers themselves. I'm excited.
It's very exciting times, exciting times. And as you know, my thing, not only about climate control, but the impacts of health as a result of the climate impacts that we're feeling. So we'll be talking more and more about that. And
it's not just the little body health, or not just the mental health, but it's the health, that's the health of the universe, that's right? Correct. I mean, health of the planet.
Right.
And it's such an integrating, like health and wellness, it's such an integrating concept that allows us to, and there are direct causal relationships. People are getting asthma. People are, choking on this smoke right now in Australia. They can't breathe. The hospitals are filling up. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Billions and billions of wildlife have died. Okay.
That's correct.
So we got to, there's some healing that we need to do, and we're going to have to call upon all the healers of all kinds of different stripes to do that. So it's such a pleasure to talk to you, and I think this is a good time to sign off and to talk about what comes next. See you later.
Thanks, Art. Take care.
Okay. See you later. Bye.